So Andrew, you kind of legitimized online education in a way by bringing a premium institute like IIT Madras coming in into online education, offering a BSc and an alumni status, right? So was there any opposition from the institute, because you all built on high quality and people wouldn't know what the quality of online education is going to be?
Thanks for inviting me to the panel. Thanks for everyone who's here to listen to us. It was a process. So there was lots of debate inside the institution. I can't say there was no debate, but I have to say there was overwhelming support. Definitely there was huge support for this endeavor that we took on. Just to clarify what Suresh meant, for those of you who don't know, IIT Madras today runs a Bachelor of Science program. It's a BS program, a 4-year program in data science and applications. Very skill-oriented. I should thank Niharika for bringing that up as an important thing. Very, very strongly skill-oriented. And also, finally, those who go through the degree get a degree from IITM and become alums. So some points of view that were made against such a program was that large numbers implies poor quality, right? So you cannot maintain the same standard if you increase numbers. So definitely that was one point that was made. The other point, which I distinctly remember, is that a heart surgeon should not be treating common cold. So this was another comment that came up. Yes, comments did come up. It's not that they didn't come up, but I should say among the faculty, staff, students, alums, there was overwhelming support for this initiative. I think it's because almost everybody understood the social context. And today, if you look at the higher education landscape and where we are, India needs to educate lakhs and lakhs of people with good quality education at a reasonable cost that is affordable to many. I think there are solutions coming at the 40 lakhs per degree range, even the 20 lakhs per degree range. And we either have the 50,000 rupee per degree or the 20 lakh. We don't have good, solid solutions in the 4 lakh, 5 lakh, and parents get so anxious during admission, they don't get to good degrees. It's always there. And nobody was doing anything about it. And I think that overwhelming social pressure is what won at the end.
Incredible. The good side is you now have 15,000 students. And not so good side is that you're pushing people like us to also start to think that you stop being very, very selective, start thinking of programs that are far more socially relevant and affordable, right? So Rupal, you're from Coursera. I think Coursera kind of set the trend for MOOC, right? Andrew Ng. So he was the one who set up MOOC and opened up this entire online education, to the extent that New York Times in 2012 said that it is going to be a wonder drug for changing human capital. So we've gone through that huge wave of exuberance. We may have slightly down to the trough of despair, right? So what do you think have been the learnings over the years for online?
Right. Thanks, Suresh. I think it's an interesting question. I also think, just building on the previous conversations and what Niharika said, one thing can't clearly be the solution to all challenges in education and skill out there. So if you think about MOOCs, I think MOOCs are increasingly becoming a stepping stone for a learner's journey. And I'll share two interesting data points. One is that we see that when learners engage with MOOCs, at least on Coursera, their ability or their confidence and their performance of enrolling into fully online degrees increases by about 25 to 40%. So for those of you who don't know, at Coursera, we of course have MOOCs, but we have about 38, 40 fully online degrees from institutions around the world. So what we're seeing is that MOOCs are actually becoming a stepping stone and giving learners the confidence that they can also apply and get into some of the most renowned institutions around the world and learn from them. So that's one. Second, one of our online degree partners in the US, who actually teaches a suite of engineering degrees, did a survey with their learners to understand what's going well, what are they really appreciating in the degree program. And something that they learned was 75% of their students who are enrolled said that they wouldn't even have considered applying to the online degree program if performance assessment pathways weren't there. What's a performance assessment pathway? There are two ways of getting into an online degree. You write a test, you make the mark, you put in an application entrance, and then you get in. Performance assessments are leveraging MOOCs to give the learners an opportunity to learn, complete, and demonstrate to the institution that you have the hustle, even if you don't have the 10th or the 12th standard marks to get in. And then it also gives the institutions the confidence that if you're a non-traditional student, you can still get in. So I think that what we're learning from MOOCs is really that it's a stepping stone for something much bigger throughout the learner's learning journey.
So it's kind of a sandbox to try out the technology and understand the mechanisms or the pedagogy, and then try to aim bigger.
Right,
Yeah.
as well as if you're not from a tech background, and let's say you do want to change the trajectory of your life, you want to change careers, then it gives you the space to engage, experiment, and build the confidence that you can enroll into a fully online degree and you too can complete.
Thanks, Rupal. So Rajesh, a lot of things that Niharika was mentioning, I thought we had in our conversation yesterday in terms of what you're doing as an institution. So very baby steps that you're taking. So you're kind of separating education and skills, giving students a holistic experience. You're looking at platform, you are bringing in liberal, as she said, we need to change the kind of the mindset students have. And you're also bringing in this industry connect that's been lacking in our education for long, right? So while this sounds very good on paper, so what are the challenges in actually bringing it to life, both in India and abroad?
Thanks, Professor. Appreciate you having me over here. Just for context, so that everybody in the audience is also sure about what we're talking about. Kalvi, what we're doing is we're partnering with formal universities and offering contextual learning by virtue of bringing in work into the regular degree stream itself. Similar to what Professor Niharika was talking about. We're talking about 40% of their degree programs being actual work. And we've started with the context of computer science itself, which is like the fastest from an industry perspective, adoption perspective. So while if I have to just take a step back, everybody for the last, we've been in the space for over 13 years now. Every conference that I go to, everybody keeps worrying about how our students are unemployable and how industry keeps fretting about how talent supply is the only stumbling block, in a manner of speaking, from a hyper growth that they could potentially take and all. When you look at the overarching structures that govern education, we're still a little steeped in dinosaurs world or era, is what I would say. Not so much in the context of regulator. I think it's largely in the perspective of individual universities or formal education institutions, what we're seeing. From a challenge perspective, I think it's just a very human thing. We're used to doing some things in a particular way, and change is always the hardest thing to come by, irrespective of the amount of good that may be at the end of the curve or over the cliff. That's the standard thing that we're seeing. It's not just an Indian phenomenon. We're also collaborating with universities in the entire Asian continent, Middle East to Southeast Asia. Across board, at the very onset, the first impeding challenge that we find is like, this is great, but what about the academic rigor, and what about the holistic aspect of academia? It's kind of corollary to what Professor Niharika was talking about, the example that she gave where the industry was not willing to let the university into the 2 years of shop floor experience. Is the corollary is what we're facing now. University keeps saying that it's all right, but we need to have a extremely tight overview about everything that happens. Industry obviously is going to be a little reluctant. I'm not talking about data privacy, those sort of concerns. Primarily, if a quantum of work is being assigned to a student as part of the curriculum, if the university is going to be very fussy about how they evaluate, because there are no evaluation tools at the university to evaluate actual real work. Today, I'm sure a lot of industry folks here employ final semester students for full-time internships. You can relate to what I'm going to say. Almost always the 8 or 16 credits that get awarded towards the last degree awarding thing for the final semester project or the internship that they do, it's almost like a very subjective evaluation. There is no framework that the university gives basis which you can potentially give an 8 or a 10 or a 6 or even fail somebody if they're not done well. So on account of lack of frameworks and the primary resistance to change is what the biggest challenge we're facing. As against, while the concept is fantastic, who doesn't want like jobs at the end of first year? Who doesn't want great career outcomes? But general inertia, Newton's law.
Thank you. Thanks, Rajesh. So coming to you, Andrew. So it's been about what, year and a half, 2 years since you all have launched? Yeah. So what has been the most surprising insight that you have since the start of the program?
Okay, you skipped a question, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right. So I asked this question to a lot of people in my team, was what is the surprising insight that they thought they would have. The first one person said, the ability of students to work through a tough and rigorous online program. So an online program coming from IIT is going to be tough and rigorous. An ability of a student to work through that program online, do every evaluation. All our evaluation is in person, right? Every month they have to come to a center, write an exam. We keep it really, really rigorous and tough on them. Will they be able to really go through that? That was something we debated quite a bit, and we found at the end that if there's value at the end of it, they become an alum of IIT at the end of it. Students can do that. They do that. That's number one. The other thing that was out there was this fear of premier institutes that suddenly you'll have lakhs of people at your doorstep, right? So there was this big fear that suddenly you won't be able to control the floodgates anymore, this, that, and the other. I think that was also not very realistic. People are quite smart. They know the limitations, they know the advantages, and they pick smartly. And so far we've had about 60,000, 70,000 odd applications, and about 15,000 are in the program. So it's a good rate, and it's working out well. And to me personally, the huge surprise, I think I do expect it, but every time I see it, it's pleasantly surprising, is this eagerness that youngsters in the country across the board, whichever state you go to, the eagerness they have for going to a good education institution for learning, and how much they appreciate the efforts we take to teach them and handhold them and bring them out into the degree. I've met so many of our students, different cultures, Delhi, Bombay, Chennai, Bangalore. We're going to meet them today as well. The way they react to you is very different. They tend to touch your feet in the north. They don't do that in the south. But they're always so appreciative and so loving and so happy to be students of IIT Madras. So that's been, I think, the biggest insight for myself.
So I remember calling you because a lot of questions, a lot of the input that you just gave is also the fears that our institute had in terms of when we were also thinking of an online course. So IIM Bangalore is going to come out with an online course sometime next year. So the conversations were quite similar. Are they going to be on campus? So when would they be on campus? Are we going to let all these thousands of people come onto campus and things like that? So it's hybrid. But I remember the first conversation I had with you, and I asked you the same question, what has been the surprising insight for you? You mentioned the quality of students, right? So, and that was the biggest fear a lot of faculty members at IIM were having, like what would be the qualification of people who are going to come in if we're going to let in people from all over the country? And the first answer you gave was like, I'm surprised by the kind of quality of students that are coming, extremely hardworking, very talented. So I went, so the way I do it is I talk to Andrew and then go back and tell our faculty members saying that IIT Madras, this is exactly how it is happening. They're saying, don't worry. So this was one.
There's no fear of quality. I think there is huge quality out there. I think it may not fit the standard definition you have of those who do high school physics, chemistry, mathematics to exceedingly great levels and solve tough problems, or those who can write CAT and 300 questions in 30 minutes or something like that. So it may not be that, but I think the standard is pretty good. Quality is very good. We found really good students through this program. Definitely.
So I'll wait to drink my water while I ask Rupal a question. So Rupal, one of the biggest problems that this online education, especially the MOOCs, have faced is we have some terrible completion rates, right? The dropout rates are phenomenal. So what do we now, what have we learned over the years in keeping up with retaining learners on the platform?
Right. And I'll actually add to Andrew's point earlier. I think what we're seeing is that a lot of the learners who come online, especially for online degree programs, they may not, clear CAT and IIT-JEE as much, but they've got so much more of a hunger and desire to learn because they couldn't get in through the traditional ways that they want to come in and give in so much more. So just similar things that we're seeing. To your point, Suresh, so what we, building on Niharika's point and what we talked about earlier, I think the completion rates are not high, and that's okay because we have to give the people the space to explore. We have to give learners the space to explore. What we're seeing is that once we give learners that space to explore, to see what it is that they'd like to learn, then they want a certificate, then they want more assessments, and then they complete. So when for that section of learners on Coursera, we see the completion rate is 50 to 60%. And these are learners who will pay for a certificate, they will get access to full assessments. So what we're seeing is you give learners, you understand where they're coming from, then you create personalized pathways for them such that they experiment. And once they land on their focused specializations, they will complete. And then just in terms of how to help them complete and retain, there's some things that we've been seeing as we do a lot of research on platform, on the learner side as well as the faculty side when you author. On the learner side, what we see is helping learners start early and stay on. So how do you leverage machine learning algorithms to create nudges, help learners build a discipline, help learners build a schedule such that even if they're offline, they're really building a rhythm of learning in their life. On the faculty and the authoring side, of course, what we see is how do you scaffold learning? So it just can't be a video, it just can't be assessments. How do you bring together videos, assessments, practice, reflections, social learning, discussion forums together such that you keep the learners engaged? And then how do you help them apply and then upskill, to Niharika's point? So are there virtual labs that learners can use such that they're engaging, applying the application, and showcasing their programs on LinkedIn and portfolios on LinkedIn, etc.
Oh, thanks. So Rajesh, you were saying that you would want to take the current education and make it more customer-centric. And that has been a very strongly contested word in our campus, that we are becoming very customer-centric, and that is not how students should be. The students should listen to faculty members, and we control, we decide what is good for them. This entire customer centricity in education won't bring any kind of learning for the students. When you said customer focused teaching, do you think that our fears are not really true, that having a customer focus for the student would mean that it dilutes their learning? So is that a challenge, or do you think you could work around that?
I think it's about perspectives again, right? So who's the customer? I think education system for most parts, it's very complex from, unlike say any other industries. There is a paying customer, there is a consuming customer, there is an eventual beneficiary of the talent that comes out. They're like very conflicting for most parts. Right? Parents pay for the tuition fees and so on and so forth. The kid is actually learning, in a manner of speaking. I mean, I'm talking about formal education. And the eventual consumer of the talent is an industry or society itself at large. And because these are very non-overlapping, unfortunately non-overlapping in most cases, is I think where the whole customer centricity is also kind of misconstrued. While universities, formal education institutions, leading institutions come with past experience and enough expertise in the manner, in a word, how a particular skill needs to be administered, how a knowledge should be disseminated to a particular students. We come from a other end of the spectrum where the customer that we are largely referring to is the industry, because ultimately the intention of formal education in today's time and context is still largely around furthering one's economic prowess in the society and so on and so forth. If jobs are a vast majority's prerogative, then if you come from the enterprise end in terms of what is it that the industry wants, specifically, I think that is where we're coming from. To your point about, of course, I'm sure all of us were 17, 18, and we were all in the first year of college. We still want to have a way around being disciplined in some way and manner, because that's just the way we've all grown up, at least in this part of the world. But when we align things towards what it actually matters from an end objective, if the sole dictum that we're going to work around is end objective of the degree program or the formal credentialing that we're offering is employment or economic furtherance, if we keep that as the center of the whole thing, I think this outlook also changes, because a lot of university partners that we talk to have the exact same concern. When we say that, we want to run programs from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock, they're kind of flabbergasted. How do you expect a faculty to be there in the university from morning through evening? It starts from that, very, very tactical, but that's where the whole resistance starts. But when they see that the students are going to actually work in an enterprise from 9 to 6, that's just how labor system seems to be working, then they relate to it and then say, yeah, it makes sense. Obviously, we still need to solve for this whole academic layer, which is used to 4 months of vacation or 3 months of vacation and 9 to 4 sort of working, but that's still solvable with whatever additional interventions we bring in. I don't want to sound against the whole idea of how formal education works in our country or the world, but customizing towards, or rather aligning towards what the end objectives are, will further our acceleration towards end outcomes in a far more emphatic manner is what I feel.
Thanks, Rajesh. So Andrew, so what have been your personal beliefs that have changed since the time that you started the program? As in, like, what have been your learning as a teacher, as an enabler over the years of the last 2 years of doing the online BSc?
So in terms of personal beliefs, the way that we started this program was with a certain intention, and I don't know if that intention, that personal belief has changed or not. I think it's only getting more and more affirmed right now. Maybe it's a good thing. The belief basically is that if you look at a typical US state, right? I go to the US just for example, there'll always be a large public university which admits people and gives out a degree at very reasonable cost. In most places, maybe it's too high still for us, but still it's reasonable cost. So if you look for a good quality, large public university in a state which is taking in people and putting them out, they're highly valued at the output, that's not very many in India. Somehow that culture never caught on. The large, well-funded public universities, good reputed ones, are so selective, and they continue to be so selective. They want to go towards the Harvard route, while someone like me, I would have a belief that the large public universities in every state today, we have an IIT. The IITs should go towards the Berkeley, Purdue type route, where you admit tens of thousands of students a year as opposed to thousands a year, and we go in that direction, right? So this is a very important point where we are as IITs and all that, and we need industry support for that. We need industry to come in and say, a premier institution like IIT is stepping out there and going in this direction of doing large-scale, high-quality, a big change in the education scenario in the country, and we would like to support you and hire the graduates to help them do well in life. So I think that's something that that belief from me has to sort of get transferred to industry, and instead of asking us questions, your BTech computer science grads are great, are they comparable to these graduates that you're putting out? Instead of asking comparison questions of that sort, look at our program, look at it, believe in what we're trying to do, and then go look at our program, see if these graduates are good for you. And I can assure you, there's so much talent out there. And if you can see beyond the BTech Computer Science IIT Madras, you will definitely meet so many wonderful graduates, and this can help you grow, help us grow as a country.
Thanks a lot. So Rupal, So thanks for sharing a lot of interesting insights into how MOOCs are working. But from what I've noticed, there is a lot more functional courses which seem to be doing well. Have you been experimenting on the kind of experiential courses that required, as Niharika was mentioning, or management kind of schools where you need to discuss a different pedagogy? So have you had any success there?
Uh, Interesting question, Suresh, and a couple of thoughts. I think most of our programs are fully online. We haven't done much hybrid, and that's probably because of our fully online degrees, postgraduate diploma, certificate programs. We've been able to get the engagement online. Though our institutions, much like what Andrew was talking about, will often get their students together in different countries, different regions to meet together, but to not for compulsory teaching. Because remember, the moment you make travel a compulsory requirement, you're self-selecting a group of people out. Because a lot of people who enroll online, especially in credentialed programs, have family commitments, have full-time work, and they may not necessarily want to come to campus for something. So that's one side of belief. But I did want to highlight that while not hybrid, a form of programs that we're seeing be very exciting and kind of successful on Coursera are gateway certificates. These are industry-developed certificate programs that are job relevant. So what we do is we partner with Google, with IBM, with Tally, with PwC, and we build entry-level certificates with the industry partners that are very job relevant, that are tightly aligned to job technical analysis. What does the individual do? So IT project management, Tally is building a bookkeeping certificate, such that it doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you want to change the trajectory of your life, you can start and learn from scratch. And the moment you complete this certificate, the company is going to be open to interviewing you for the job. And while those are not hybrid and in-person experiential, they're extremely applied online. And interesting fact, what we're seeing there is, especially in India, about 40% of the learners enrolled in these gateway entry-level programs are women. So that gives us a bit of energy that we can create job-relevant pathways into STEM and actually help diverse groups of learners change the trajectory of their lives.
So yeah, but I was also wondering, could there be some form of an online pedagogy that we could, while it's not possible, like to have a small conversation in a class, have there been any experiments that Coursera has done, like to do case study online or asynchronously, or I don't know?
Of course. So we have a few business degrees, like Illinois has an IMBA. We of course have like Wharton teaching MOOCs online and full case study. In fact, I'm taking a MOOC right now, which is by a professor called Sydney Finkel from Tuck School of Management at Dartmouth. If any of you are thinking about change management and how to be coaches as managers, it's a beautiful course. It's all built around case studies. So what we see is case studies are harder to do async, but you can still do it by enabling flipped classroom, by using group discussions, by breaking students into smaller groups and encouraging discussion. In fact, quite a few of our business online degree programs are extremely diverse. So IMBA by Illinois has about now 5,000, 6,000 plus students from 90 plus countries. Macquarie in Australia has equal number of students from about 30, 40 plus countries. So the way you do case study with these very diverse groups of individuals is breaking them into diverse, high engaging small groups online and encouraging flipped study group conversations with them.
Thanks, that's quite interesting. So Rajesh, do you think it's time we invest, it perhaps high time that we invest effort in order to make our content available in other languages, because you're primarily still with English? Because if you are going to look at high quality education, we really can't change that without bringing in other Indian languages.
Absolutely right. So I think it all, again, I'll go back to my previous response. It all, if you're going to keep it centered towards what the end outcomes are, like say, it's largely again going to be industry specific is what I would believe. If you're talking about IT as an industry, it is still largely English driven because the global markets are still largely English, barring China and Japan maybe. The rest of the places still largely work on English. And hence IT kind of courses, a degree, credential sort of things would still make sense in English. But whereas if you look at much large, as a matter of fact, IT is still like a very, very small proportion of workforce in a country like ours. If you look at the other large employment-oriented things like retail or PFSI, any of them, most of them are like still very vernacular. If I take a step back and look at why do people want degrees, two things, right? One is expanded scope of knowledge and potential skills. Two, and more critically, the credential that signals their maturity or readiness for the job itself. In both these contexts, I strongly personally believe that if you have to have a much larger engagement, better cross-enrollment ratio as how the government wants. Government is looking at doubling the numbers from 27, 28 to almost 50% over the next 5 years. If that has to happen, I think vernacular is the way to go, so that we are able to, like say, get there sooner, and it'll be much more. Today we are like a very productive economy in a manner of speaking. Whatever big ambitions around 5 trillion, all of those things need to materialize. I think vernacular is the way to go. Largely again aligned towards the specific industries that they all cater to, what I feel.
Yeah, thanks, Rajesh. So I think we have a couple of minutes to close. I just thought I'll ask the panelists. We have like large number of industry captains here, and you're talking to CII. Is there anything that you'd want to ask, or maybe put a point across? Good audience to do that.
So earlier, yesterday morning, actually, we met with a group of industries which we thought is potentially interested in hiring our graduates from the data science program. There's a much larger group here. So I'll say the same thing to them. So as part of this program, we are thinking of an apprenticeship program. In the final year, students will be able to credit an apprenticeship. They'll be able to spend 8 months to 12 months in the premises of the companies, and we're willing to give credit for that. And anyway, they're learning online, so it works out for them. So if you're interested in learning more about how to have IITM graduates as apprentices in your companies, happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll probably say the flip of what Andrew just said. As I mentioned, at Coursera, we partnered with some of the top institutions like the IITs and IIMs. And we also partner with some of the top corporates to create skills, entry level and advanced, for learners around the world. So just like PwC, Tally, L&T, Fractal, Zoho, a few conversations, I would encourage you all to think about, do you want to be the kind of the bearers of the torch and help enable skilling in the country and the region? And if you're interested in doing that, if you're interested in thinking about what are the most critical jobs and you'd like to help author content and make people job ready, I'd love to talk to you.
I'll probably have slightly more open-ended thing. All of us are industry folks here. We largely look at entry-level talent from the lens of whether they can straight out start working on a particular job role and all of those things. We keep reading a lot about how we need to hire for attitude and not necessarily for skills, because skills is something what you can pick on all of those things. To this date, we see that there is a clearly earmarked caste system in our country in terms of, like, say, students who graduate from premier institutions get that extraordinary levels of benefits in terms of access and everything, and students who are from non-premier institutions don't end up getting that sort of recognition or even an opportunity for that matter. We typically end up blaming this whole thing on account of we have only like 5 positions to fill, and the easy filter is to look at the school that they graduated from or the GPA that they come in from. This initial cohort that we are recruiting for at Kalvi, we did a quick analysis. We've enrolled about 40 students. This is out of a cohort of about close to 3,000 students who gave the entrance examination for this particular program. The students who cleared, none of them have scored north of 70% in JEE mains. Just going on to show that the native ability or the talent per se is not directly correlated to the competitive exams that our country is so used to, which is a pathway or an essential entry point into the linear institution. I do myself come from premier institutions from a pedigree perspective, and I'm probably in a place to also comment about this, because I understand how it is okay not to be from a premier institution and still be very, very talented in a native manner, depending on the kind of industry and the job and the skill that we're going after. That's one request I have. Let's not probably get blindsided by the pedigree or the resume or the application tracking system what our human resource or people function is using. If we can potentially be a little more, I know I'm sounding very philosophical here, but if we can potentially kind of broaden the spectrum, like how Professor Andrew was mentioning about the students that come through the BSc programs, I'm pretty sure far more hungrier than a traditional BTech program, because once you're into the IIT ecosystem, you're kind of almost sorted for life, is what the thought process is. The other venture that I run, we train about 1 million students every year on employability skills. And what we have found is kids from tier 2, tier 3 institutions are far more hungrier than your tier 1 institution. The privilege is great, but I think as industry captains, my humble request is if we can be much more open to kids from across strata and not just look at grades or qualifying criteria, which is large more objective in today's time. Thank you.
So, our time is up, but there are a couple of hands going up saying they want to ask a question. So if it's okay, maybe we should ask questions. But remember, folks, you are standing between the rest of the crowd and lunch, right? But yeah, go ahead.
Sir, hello. Sir, here.
Let me get the mic to you.
Sir, I'm having the mic, so I'll start. I'm Nagendra Dutta. Sir, my question is already, as Professor Niharika demonstrated, there is a huge gap between the required skill about that too. It's very much, particularly in India, 50 to 75% of the graduates are unemployed. That means the skill what is imparted by the various institutions are not sufficient. That's the clear mirror indication. Say we have state universities, autonomous universities, then deemed universities, deemed to be universities, IIM, IITs, and of course private institutions. So many things we are having. Everybody feels that my campus is good. Everybody feels that my quality of education is at the top. That means directly, indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, the education has becoming a business. But basically, education is not totally a business. Only the fees are what is to be is to regulate what is imparted by the institutions. So to combat for this is at least a country level, at least Indian level, one standard of education, at least for the higher undergraduate or masters. Is it required? And I think it is. Some standards has to be set up. That is not the only one person. It involves industry, government, and so many other factors also.
Thanks a lot. It's a very, very interesting comment. I guess there's nothing much that it's not a question, it's a comment that all of us agree with. There are lots of people who have put up their hands.
Can I ask a question?
Just a second, yeah, go
So, what I feel, Singapore, and what I feel is that in India, you value the education by the number of people you can exclude from it. For example, the IITs and the IIMs. And there is always a debate of quality versus quantities. The IITs and IIMs say we can't take any more students. Yet next door you have China, which takes large number of students in its universities, and they have at least 6 universities in the top 50. Beida, Tsinghua, Fudan, Shanghai Jiaotong, and maybe one more. So, and I come from Singapore, even we have at least 2 universities in top 20. So why don't we have universities in top 100? That's one. Secondly, what I also want to say is that I think in India, the way education is run, everybody wants their kids to go into the top private school, to get into the top public schools, now into the top public universities. So in order to get into the top public universities, which are heavily subsidized, you not only need to go to a top school, you also need top class coaching. So a poor over there has a double whammy. Not only they don't have money to go to a good school, they're also excluded from the higher education because you can't make it to the entrance examination. How are we solving this?
So as a moderator, perhaps I'll deflect it to.
So I think I did reflect, I did mention some of these things. So those are precisely the reasons why I think premier institutes like IITs are trying to open their doors wider to let in a larger group of people. That point is very well taken. I think one of the big selling points in the Senate when we proposed this was that an IIT education, while we charge much less tuition fee, the coaching industry charges so much more every year from third standard these days. So the cost is so high that it's really puts everybody out. So that's one of the reasons why we are doing it. I think more institutes will come. It's one of our missions. I think I've been to multiple IITs to talk about our program, why they should do something like that. I think the day is not far when all IITs will do this. We can look into it. As far as ranking is concerned, all institutes are seized of this matter. There are a lot of things you have to do to improve your ranking. Some of them are purely academic, some of them are purely PR oriented, and you have to do all of those. And we are learning that slowly. And I think the day is not far again when many Indian institutions will be in the top 50 of QS rankings.
Yeah, I have one last
Yeah.
question. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I come from the education sector. I've got 2 decades in this field and very passionate about it. So I have to make 3 comments. And one thing, one thing is many of the educational centers, education has become a business, even though we are not running it as a business. So naturally, most of the educational institutions do not want to go into the hybrid and the online model because they have to lower the fees. Now, what better than to charge this full fees for 4 years and produce that, right? And if I can do a hybrid, I naturally have to reduce my cost. And so maybe I would not want that. And maybe I'm not interested in that. So I think higher education has to seriously look into this. And the institute which does that in India is going to be the #1 institute, the one that does that, and we can lower the time frame of education. You don't need 3 years for many of the courses. You don't need 4 years. You can actually reduce the time, but you want that extended time because you want the 4-year fees. And you don't want to go on a hybrid model and put it on video because you have crappy teachers. I'm not talking for everyone, but many of them, average, below average, and that's again open to the public domain, and you want to hide your dirty laundry. That's what is happening with the education sector. And one thing which, with so many industries present over here, I'd like to request you to consider online and, like Andrew has rightly put in, at the entry level. Online is appreciated later on, but not at the entry level. I had this challenge with my daughter, and so then I had to push her to a regular class degree. So you should give an opportunity for online courses, degrees, as much as we do for the others. And the third thing, when we're talking about our workforce, which is not really very productive, 75%, I think what we should do is to use technology, and I think the government should come forward, and I think as parents and as a society, to hire, you could have the best maths teacher, right? Why can't he teach to 50,000 students? Why do you not bring that person and sponsor that to the 50,000 students in a government institute? We are unskilled because the basic foundation is not really good. You have the best teacher teaching everybody. You have the best science teacher, the best arts teacher, the best humanities teacher, the best mechanical teacher, teaching to a larger audience using technology. I think we should, don't make it elite, only for the elite. We solve that, we can solve so much of India's problems. So these are the 3 things I would like to.
So can I add one point, sir?
So just a second. I think we need to close. I think a great comment. I guess all the panelists here are working towards whatever you are saying, that elite institutions are looking at models where they could train larger number of people at a much more affordable price, giving really high quality education. The kind of experiments Coursera has been doing in terms of educating people across the world, not just one country, which means that cultural differences in terms of how pedagogy is kind of consumed. Right? So very interesting times that we are. A lot of what you say is going to happen in the coming days. Like Rajesh is trying to do some interesting experiments. So So I see a lot of us are passionate about education. It has not been really good until now because it's been really, quality education was available to very few people, but all the experiments here are going to change that over the next 10 years, and I think in the next 10 years, things are going to be completely different with respect to the kind of education that we're going to have, right? So
Can I launch-
thanks a lot, everyone.